Today is May 17, 2023. I want to talk about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. I want to start by looking at the live map. This is liveuamap.com. It is a pro-Ukrainian map. Keep that in mind when we're looking at it. And if we look at it, we can see that not much has changed since my last update. The line of contact in Kherson and Zaporozhye here in the south is relatively unchanged. This is where the offensive, the Ukrainian spring-summer offensive, is expected to be launched, at least in this area, if not in other areas. Most of the ongoing fighting now, the most intense fighting taking place now, is in the Donbas region. Outside of Donetsk city, fighting continues in Avdiivka, which is now significantly encircled by Russian forces. And of course, there's the ongoing battle for Bakhmut. And you can see this western part of the city is still held by Ukrainian forces. And if you zoom in, you can see these are very heavily constructed apartment blocks. They make ideal fortifications in an urban environment. They're very difficult to flush troops out of, and it's a very methodical process. Sending in infantry to clear them is extremely dangerous. It takes a lot of firepower to damage them sufficiently to compel any forces occupying them to leave. But people should keep in mind that this is not about taking Bakhmut. It had been an operation designed to grind down Ukrainian forces. This was what was stated back in October of last year, and that is what has been going on. And in previous updates, I've shown evidence of Ukrainian forces using some of their best equipment in and around Bakhmut. And this is equipment like self-propelled howitzers from the United States and from Germany that you would think they would want to hold back and use for their offensive. Instead, they're using it in and around Bakhmut. It's very vulnerable to, say, drone strikes and counter battery operations, and they are losing this equipment in and around Bakhmut. They will not obviously be able to use it in the upcoming offensive. So this operation designed to grind down Ukrainian forces is successful. How much of a difference will it make ahead of the Ukrainian spring-summer offensive? Impossible to tell until it happens. In addition to that, as Russian forces are waiting for the Ukrainian offensive, they have been carrying out extensive drone, missile, and bombing missions all across Ukraine, using military aviation along the line of contact with these glide bombs that I've talked about previously, and also a host of long-range missiles and drones to attack ammunition depots, fuel storage, warehouses, command centers that would be used for coordinating the offensive if and when it unfolds, and even Kiev itself. And there are news stories like this. They're talking about a huge mushroom blast in Khmelnytsky, and they're talking about a huge ammunition dump. There's a picture of it here that was hit. There's a chain reaction. You can see how huge that explosion is. And that is what a significant ammo dump looks like when it goes up. And we know, and we have been talking about for months, how short on ammunition Ukraine is. Not only that, how short the West is on ammunition to give Ukraine. This is not ammunition that they had to spare ahead of this upcoming offensive, and it is not an amount of ammunition that will be easily replaced by the West. Again, how much this is going to actually impact the offensive potential of Ukrainian forces ahead of this spring-summer offensive, it's impossible to tell, but it is almost certainly going to have an impact. Talking about the missiles targeting Kiev, well, we heard a few days ago that the US-made Patriot missile system downed a Kinzhal missile. Ukrainian Air Force spokesman repeatedly denied this and said categorically this did not happen. But the Western media ran with the story anyway. Other officials in the Ukrainian government were running with this story, and eventually the Ukrainian Air Force spokesman went along with it too, not because new evidence emerged, but just because of the momentum of this, what was an obvious lie. Now, much more recently, just yesterday for me, there was another attack on Kiev with Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. I don't know the exact number, maybe 2 or 3. And there is video of a Patriot battery launching upward to 30 missiles over the course of approximately 2 minutes before a huge fireball consumes the area where these missiles were being launched from. And it looked like a Kinzhal missile destroying a Patriot missile battery. And then later, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that Kinzhal hypersonic weapon hit a US-made Patriot air defense system in Kiev. This is from TASS, Russian state media. Then we had Ukraine. This is via the BBC. Ukraine war. Kiev says it shot down Russian hypersonic missiles. Ukraine is claiming that they shot all of these missiles down. They refuse to talk about the Patriot missile battery being struck by a Kinzhal hypersonic missile. The BBC article says Ukraine says it shot down hypersonic missiles amid an exceptionally dense barrage fired at Kiev on Tuesday, which is just yesterday for me. Kiev said air defenses intercepted 6 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, which Russia has claimed can overcome all existing air defense systems. They were among 18 missiles of different types fired at the city in a short space of time, officials said. Russia denies its Kinzhals were stopped and said one destroyed a US-supplied Patriot air defense system. Ukraine declined to comment. The BBC cannot independently verify the claims made by either side. They cannot, or they do not want to, because so we have Russia claiming one thing, we have Ukraine claiming the other thing. The BBC is pretending they have no way of telling which is which. Well, we have this CNN article, US assessing potential damage of Patriot missile defense system following Russian attack near Kiev. And it says a US-made Patriot air defense system was likely damaged but not destroyed as a result of a Russian missile barrage in and around Kiev early Tuesday morning, local time. A US official tells CNN. The US is still assessing to what degree the system was damaged. So they're saying it was damaged. So the Kinzhal missile got through, at least one got through, and it hit a Patriot missile battery. And they're trying to assess how much damage was done. That will determine whether the system needs to be pulled back entirely or simply repaired on the spot by Ukrainians' forces. Well, Ukrainians aren't going to be able to repair any sort of damage to a Patriot missile system. It will have to be technicians, most likely in Poland, sent to Kiev to fix them, or they'll have to take whatever was damaged, send it to Poland to be fixed. Something was damaged, and it was damaged by a Kinzhal missile. The Patriot missile system failed to intercept. Now, the thing is, the Patriot missile system is not one piece of equipment. It is a complex of equipment. There's a command center, there are radars, there are the launchers themselves, there are generators, and all of this equipment is spread out. It's usually, it shouldn't be bunched up all in one area, specifically to mitigate damage if and when the air defense systems are targeted by, say, a missile like the Kinzhal. But something was definitely damaged. And again, Patriot missile systems are on short supply. The interceptors that they use, the missiles that they launch, are in very short supply. As Alexander Mikuris of the Duran pointed out, 30 missiles, approximately 30 missiles over about 2 minutes, that is entirely unsustainable. I've pointed out before how there are shortages of the Patriot missile system. There are shortages of the interceptors. I've talked about how Saudi Arabia, while trying and often failing to intercept drones coming from Yemen, drones and missiles coming out of Yemen, they were running out of interceptors for their Patriot missile system. The United States was unable to sell more to Saudi Arabia because production of the missile annually is so low. Saudi Arabia ended up having to borrow missiles from others in the region who also operate the Patriot system. I want to show you this from Lockheed Martin's official website. This is a news release from October 2022. New Lockheed Martin facility to support increased PAC-3 production. So they're talking about these missiles. And it says Lockheed Martin has steadily increased production numbers of PAC-3 MSE since achieving a full rate production decision in 2018. Currently producing more than 300 PAC-3 MSEs each year and expecting to increase to 500 PAC-3 MSEs. And well, expecting to reach 500 when, but whether it's 300 or 500 or something in between, if you are launching 30 missiles in over the span of about 2 minutes, trying to intercept 2 or 3 Kinzhal missiles, one obviously got through, that is not sustainable. That is not sustainable if your annual production rate is 300 to 500 missiles. And we're talking about 300 to 500 missiles being produced and then made available to all operators of the Patriot missile system worldwide. Although, considering its performance in Ukraine and before that in Saudi Arabia, you would expect the user base for the Patriot missile to decline. And all while we watch the Patriot missile system fail in front of the eyes of the world, the West is still talking about the next wonder weapon they're going to send to Ukraine to change the tide. We heard about the Storm Shadow missile the UK had sent to Ukraine. It is now in use. Russia is already reporting that it is intercepting them, and people will say, well, Russia is just saying that. How true could it possibly be? Well, we just saw this incident in Kiev. Russia said they hit the Patriot missile system. Ukraine denied it. And then US officials actually admitted, no, yes, the Kinzhal missile did hit. There was damage. And they're trying to assess how much damage. So when Russia makes these claims, they're generally telling the truth. When they say they are now intercepting several Storm Shadow missiles, I think that it's very plausible. Again, even Western analysts admit Russia has the best air defense systems in the world. It is not difficult to believe that they will have a lot of success downing these Storm Shadow cruise missiles. Of course, some will always make it through, but they are going to have a lot of success and continued success downing these missiles. The next wonder weapon, though, that we're hearing more and more about, and we're actually seeing preparation being made for this, is F-16s. Send Ukraine the F-16s. That's what we keep hearing. And now we have articles like this from The Guardian. UK and Netherlands agree international coalition to help Ukraine procure F-16 jets. Rishi Sunak and Mark Rutte announced plans a day after Vladimir Zelensky said Kiev could soon receive fighter jets. Well, how soon? Because it takes years to train pilots to operate an F-16 effectively. And it also is going to take years to set up the infrastructure needed in Ukraine to operate them. You need ground support equipment, you need ground crews, maintenance crews, and you're doing this all in Ukraine at some airport. Which airport are you going to set this all up that Russia is not going to immediately use its cruise missiles to strike and destroy? Which is exactly what happened to Ukraine's Air Force that it started with at the beginning of the special military operation in February 2022. So the Guardian article says Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Dutch leader Mark Rutte have agreed to build an international coalition to help procure F-16 fighter jets for Ukraine, the British government has announced. A Downing Street spokesperson said Sunak and Rutte would work to build an international coalition to provide Ukraine with combat air capability, supporting with everything from training to procuring F-16 jets. The Prime Minister reiterated his belief that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO, and the leaders agreed on the importance of allies providing long-term security assistance to Ukraine to guarantee they can deter against future attacks. And we remember that while President Zelensky is saying they expect to get F-16s soon, if you read the fine print, they're talking about giving NATO warplanes to Ukraine after this conflict ends. And when you really think about it, all that does is motivate Russia even more to continue this special military operation and see it through to the end. Because if they fail, if they waver, if they give in, NATO is just going to rebuild Ukraine's military to as strong as it was before the special military operation, if not stronger, if Russia gives them the opportunity to do so. So almost certainly they're not going to do that. There is nothing about the F-16 that gives it some sort of special capability that Ukraine's own warplanes didn't have. There's nothing about an F-16 that makes it less vulnerable to being destroyed on the ground by Russian cruise missiles. Nothing about it that makes it less vulnerable to Russian air defenses, and nothing that makes it less vulnerable to Russian air-to-air munitions. So all they're going to do is, just like they did with the Patriots and everything else, all the other wonder weapons, they're going to funnel it into Ukraine, and Russia is going to destroy it. Ukraine and the West are at a fundamental disadvantage in this conflict. Russia has a greater military industrial output than the collective West does, apparently. This is something that Russia had been preparing for years, and this is something the West has neglected for years. There is also Russia's anti-access area denial capabilities. This is something that they have invested in for decades, and again, the West neglected it in favor of offensive capabilities, obtaining air superiority over a targeted country, for example. And they neglected air defenses. So Russia has these capabilities. The West is unable to overcome them. They're also unable to match or exceed the amount of men and material that Russia can put on the battlefield. The only thing that has a chance of shifting the balance of power on the battlefield in favor of Ukraine is if all of NATO decides to intervene directly and they commit the majority of their best capabilities when they do so. We have articles like this from Politico. The end of Ukraine aid is rapidly approaching. Re-upping it won't be easy. The Pentagon could run out of money for weapons by mid-summer. It says the $48 billion Ukraine aid package that Congress approved in December has about $6 billion left, meaning U.S. funding for weapons and supplies could dry up by mid-summer. That's raising fresh concerns among lawmakers about what the White House is planning next, including when the administration will ask for another major package and whether it will be enough. The funding, many members say, needs to continue to flow without interruption, especially as Kiev prepares to launch what's expected to be a sweeping counteroffensive and retake ground in the east from the Russians. The article also points out the original $48 billion package approved in December included about $36 billion for the Pentagon to craft a wide range of military aid to Kiev. The U.S. sent millions of artillery shells, funded tanks, and shipped armored vehicles and advanced air defense systems into the Ukrainian military's hands. However, one thing the Politico article doesn't talk about is not necessarily the problem of finding more money. I think they will be able to find more money. They can print money out of thin air. The problem is you can have all the money in the world if you don't have the military industrial output to create weapons to buy with that money, physical, tangible weapons, then it means nothing. And that is actually what the West is out of. They're not out of money. They're out of actual weapons to buy with that money. They talk about millions of artillery shells. Where are they going to find millions more? They cannot. They admittedly cannot, and they cannot expand production fast enough to fix that problem. Same goes for tanks, artillery pieces, and air defense systems. People forget they're talking about 230 main battle tanks provided to Ukraine ahead of this spring-summer offensive. Ukraine started in February of 2022 with over 1,000 tanks, over 1,000 artillery pieces. They had a large and formidable integrated air defense system. A lot of this is at the end of the line, the Soviet-era air defense systems. They're running out of missiles to use with them. They're also physically losing the launchers themselves in battle and because of disrepair. And the West is trying to replace this capability, but the West does not have the quality or the quantity in terms of air defense to do that. They just physically cannot replace the number of air defense systems Ukraine started out with, and they cannot match the quality. And there is no way to fix this problem in the near or even intermediate future. So what is the West doing? They're just dragging this out for as long as possible. This is what they did in Vietnam. This is what they did in Afghanistan for 20 years. This is what they're doing in Iraq and also in Syria. They're dragging it out for as long as possible out of malice and spite. They're doing it because they lack any better option to choose from. And they're also doing it in the belief that maybe if they just remain persistent, some sort of development might unfold that will give them back the advantage. Or maybe they believe if they just maintain their resolve, Russia will lose its resolve and there will be some sort of political division or even collapse inside of Russia. This is what they're doing right now, because logistically they have lost this war of attrition. And when you look at history, this approach did not work in Vietnam or Afghanistan. It's not working in Iraq or in Syria. It's very reasonable to believe that it also is not going to work in Ukraine. And remember, while all of this is happening, while the US is waging this proxy war against Russia and Ukraine, the US is preparing a very similar conflict here in Asia. And they're not just backing and building up separatist forces on the island province of Taiwan, they're also trying to shape the whole region into a united front against China. Just as the US turned Europe against Russia, they want to turn the rest of Asia against China. I'm here in Southeast Asia. I'm in Thailand specifically. There were general elections. The US invested millions and millions of dollars and years in manipulating the socio-political landscape of Thailand to ensure that their proxies got into power. They won the general election. Even before they got into power, they did quite a bit to sabotage Thai-Chinese relations. That was before they even came near the levers of power. And now that they won the election, they're already talking about serving the international rules-based order, which is a pledge of fealty to the United States. And so we're going to be seeing a lot of the same developments here that we saw in Europe leading up to the proxy war against Russia. We're seeing the same developments in the lead up to a war or proxy war with China. I think a lot of people in Asia can see what's going on in Europe. And even if the US gets the upper hand in certain ways, I think there's going to be a lot more pushback here in Asia than there was in Europe, or we could at least hope. We have to keep an eye on all of this, all of these developments. It's all linked together. It is not just the conflict in Ukraine. It extends out much further than that, and it's linked directly to what's going on in Asia as well. And we have to look at it as a whole to understand it piece by piece. Until next time, if you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Check the video description below for other places you can find and follow my work. Also in the video description below are all of the links that I referenced in this video, as well as ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel, so if an ad pops up, feel free to skip it because it's not helping me out at all. If you do want to help support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also Patreon. Again, the links to those options and others are in the video description below. And to everyone who has been supporting my work, thank you so much. That's what makes this possible, whether it's a one-time donation or month-to-month donations. It's greatly appreciated. I also greatly appreciate people who share my work with others and get the word out about this information, about these developments. That is the primary purpose of this work, is to raise awareness of these problems so we can start trying to formulate a solution. So again, thank you, and as always, thank you for watching.